On true crime threads, a teacher's affairs end in murder. In a quiet suburban town, high school teacher Vanessa Hart had built a reputation for being not only smart and dedicated but also incredibly charming. She was the kind of teacher students adored, one who always went the extra mile to help them succeed academically and emotionally. Her bright smile and approachable demeanor made her a favorite among the staff and students alike. Vanessa was seen as a mentor, someone who could make even the most difficult subjects feel manageable. But beneath the surface of this perfect exterior, Vanessa harbored a secret that would eventually tear apart the lives of everyone involved. Carter was a shy, introverted student who often struggled to find his place among his peers. He had difficulty forming friendships and usually kept to himself, retreating into books or music to escape the challenges of social interaction. Vanessa noticed his withdrawn behavior early in the school year and made it her mission to help him. She gave him extra attention, offering him encouragement and support that no one else seemed to provide. What started as small gestures, checking in after class or offering study tips, quickly turned into something more personal. Vanessa made Carter feel seen, important even, in a way no one ever had. For the first time, he felt like he mattered. Anthony was Carter's opposite in many ways. Outgoing and brash, he was known as the class clown, always making jokes and disrupting lessons with his antics. Teachers often saw him as a troublemaker, but Vanessa saw through the bravado. She recognized that his behavior was a cover for a deeper insecurity, a need to be validated and noticed. Vanessa began to pay closer attention to Anthony, finding ways to channel his energy into something more productive. Her mentorship gave Anthony a sense of purpose, but he, too, began to see her in a different light. The playful banter between them became increasingly personal, filled with subtle undertones that blurred the line between teacher and student. Maya, on the other hand, was the star pupil. Ambitious, intelligent, and fiercely competitive, she thrived on praise and excelled in every subject. She didn't need Vanessa's help academically, but she was drawn to her charisma and the aura of warmth she exuded. Vanessa admired Maya's drive and often used her as an example of success in the classroom. Over time, their relationship deepened beyond admiration. Maya began to confide in Vanessa about her struggles at home and her fears of not living up to expectations. Vanessa, always eager to be a source of comfort, offered Maya the kind of attention she craved. In return, Maya grew increasingly attached to her teacher, seeing her as both a mentor and a protector. Vanessa's relationship with each of them was distinct, tailored to their unique personalities and needs. To Carter, she was a lifeline, someone who gave him the attention he had always yearned for. To Anthony, she was an ally, someone who didn't see him as a troublemaker but as a person with potential. To Maya, she was a confidant, a source of stability in an otherwise turbulent life. What started as professional relationships soon crossed ethical boundaries as Vanessa allowed herself to become emotionally and physically involved with all three students. At first, it seemed manageable. Vanessa believed she could handle the complexities of maintaining these relationships without anyone noticing. She rationalized her behavior, telling herself that she was helping these students in ways no one else could. But the truth was far more sinister. Vanessa thrived on the control she wielded over them, the way each student looked at her as if she were the center of their world. The power was intoxicating, and she wasn't willing to let it go. As the days turned into weeks, Vanessa found herself juggling more than just the usual demands of teaching. Each relationship required secrecy and careful management. Carter, with his quiet intensity, needed constant reassurance. Anthony, ever the opportunist, began to test how far he could push their connection. Maya, ambitious and fiercely loyal, became increasingly protective of her bond with Vanessa. What Vanessa didn't anticipate, however, was how these emotions would grow and collide in ways she could no longer control. As Vanessa's affairs with her students deepened, the web of secrecy around her life grew tighter and more fragile. What she had begun as a series of discreet relationships quickly spiraled into a complicated entanglement that demanded constant attention and control. The connections she had cultivated with Carter, Anthony, and Maya, each for different reasons, were now overlapping in ways she hadn't foreseen. The fragile balance she had maintained started to crack, and the danger of discovery loomed larger with every passing day. Carter, quiet and unassuming, had developed feelings for Vanessa that far surpassed infatuation. To him, Vanessa was more than a teacher or even a romantic interest. She was his entire world. She had given him a sense of purpose, a reason to believe he mattered. But with that devotion came an obsessive need to keep her attention on him alone. He began to linger after class more often, asking questions that had little to do with his studies. He sent Vanessa long, heartfelt messages late at night, pouring out his feelings. At first, Vanessa dismissed it as harmless, but as his obsession grew, so did his need for constant reassurance. He would analyze her every word, every glance, seeking signs that she cared for him more than anyone else. Meanwhile, Anthony was playing an entirely different game. Unlike Carter, Anthony saw his relationship with Vanessa as an opportunity. He was cunning and calculated, always looking for ways to benefit from their connection. He used his charm and humor to keep Vanessa entertained while subtly testing the limits of their relationship. Anthony's confidence made him bold, and he began to push boundaries, asking for favors and bending rules. Vanessa, eager to maintain control over him, indulged his requests, unaware that she was feeding a growing sense of entitlement. Anthony thrived on the power he felt in their relationship, using his knowledge of her secrets as leverage. He began to manipulate her subtly, testing how far he could push before she would push back. Maya, on the other hand, was far more tactical. Ambition was her driving force, and she saw Vanessa as a key figure in her success. But Maya wasn't blind to what was happening around her. She noticed the way Carter and Anthony acted differently when Vanessa was around, their subtle attempts to gain her attention and favor. Maya's instincts told her there was more to their relationships with Vanessa than met the eye. She started observing them closely, piecing together the dynamics at play. Her own bond with Vanessa grew stronger as she confided in her teacher more deeply, but underneath the surface, jealousy simmered. Maya couldn't stand the thought of sharing Vanessa's attention, let alone her affection. The once disparate relationships between the students began to intersect in increasingly dangerous ways. Carter, whose obsession with Vanessa left him constantly on edge, started noticing the way Anthony would linger near her desk or find excuses to meet her after school. His jealousy flared, and he began to view Anthony as a threat. Anthony, ever observant, saw Carter's unease as an opportunity. He subtly antagonized Carter, dropping hints that he and Vanessa shared a deeper connection. Anthony enjoyed the control he had over Carter, using it to stoke the tension between them. Maya, aware of the growing rivalry, decided to take matters into her own hands. She began carefully inserting herself into conversations and situations, positioning herself as Vanessa's closest confidant. She used her intelligence and charisma to outshine the boys, subtly reminding Vanessa that she was the most reliable and mature of the three. But Maya underestimated the desperation of her peers. Carter's quiet intensity and Anthony's calculated manipulation made them dangerous in ways she hadn't anticipated. Vanessa, too absorbed in maintaining her facade, failed to see how volatile the situation had become. She believed she could manage their emotions, keep them loyal, and prevent them from discovering the full extent of her duplicity. She reassured Carter when his jealousy became overwhelming, placated Anthony when he demanded more of her time, and praised Maya for her intelligence and loyalty. But the cracks were already forming, and the careful balance she had created was beginning to collapse. Outside the classroom, Vanessa's personal life was unraveling as well. Her husband, Daniel, had grown suspicious of her late nights and frequent absences. He questioned her about the time she spent at school, but Vanessa deflected his concerns with ease, using her charm and quick wit to avoid suspicion. However, the stress of managing multiple relationships began to take its toll. Vanessa's once flawless exterior started to show signs of strain, and those closest to her began to notice. As the tensions between Carter, Anthony, and Maya grew, so did the risk of exposure. The students, once united by their shared admiration for Vanessa, were now divided by jealousy, ambition, and manipulation. Vanessa, blinded by her own sense of control, didn't realize that the walls of her carefully constructed world were closing in. The stage was set for a catastrophic collision, one that would change all their lives forever. It wasn't long before the cracks in Vanessa's world began to show. Carter, whose obsessive feelings for Vanessa had consumed his thoughts, grew increasingly desperate. His quiet demeanor masked a storm of jealousy and paranoia that worsened with every perceived slight. He couldn't ignore the subtle signs that Vanessa's attention wasn't exclusively his. The way Anthony smirked when Vanessa praised him in class, or the fleeting glances Maya shared with her, it all gnawed at him. The idea that Vanessa might care for someone else as much as, or more than, she cared for him was unbearable. Driven by his insecurities, Carter decided he had to take control. He confronted Vanessa in a moment of emotional turmoil, his voice trembling with desperation as he demanded that she choose him over the others. He warned her that if she didn't, he would reveal everything to the school authorities. Vanessa, ever the manipulator, saw Carter's ultimatum as a threat she could neutralize. She played to his emotions, soothing him with promises she never intended to keep. She assured him that he was the most important person in her life, convincing him that his fears were unfounded. For a moment, Carter believed her, but the seed of doubt had been planted, and his obsession only deepened. The confrontation left Vanessa shaken, but she quickly dismissed it as a momentary lapse in Carter's composure. She underestimated the extent of his fixation and the danger it posed. Meanwhile, Anthony was observing the situation with calculated precision. He had begun to sense the instability in Carter's behavior and saw it as an opportunity to solidify his position. Anthony's relationship with Vanessa had always been transactional. In his eyes, he thrived on the power dynamic and the advantages it afforded him. But now he wanted more. He was tired of competing with Carter and Maya for Vanessa's attention and decided it was time to act. Anthony began sending anonymous messages to the school administration, dropping vague hints about Vanessa's inappropriate behavior. He crafted his words carefully, providing just enough information to raise suspicions without implicating himself. He knew that if Vanessa were exposed, he could use the chaos to his advantage. Maya, aware of the growing tension between Carter and Anthony, decided to make her move. She had spent weeks piecing together the dynamics of Vanessa's relationships and realized that her position was more precarious than she had thought. Maya's competitive nature wouldn't allow her to sit idly by while the others threatened her connection to Vanessa. She started gathering evidence of her own, subtly manipulating situations to ensure she stayed in Vanessa's good graces. Maya was smart enough to recognize that both Carter and Anthony were liabilities, and she began planning ways to eliminate them from the equation. However, in her efforts to outmaneuver her rivals, Maya underestimated how dangerous the situation had become. Vanessa, juggling the demands of 3 increasingly unstable relationships, found herself trapped in a web of lies she could no longer control. She reassured Carter, appeased Anthony, and encouraged Maya, believing she could keep the situation from unraveling. But the stress of maintaining the facade was taking its toll. Her once confident demeanor began to crack, and her ability to manage the students' emotions was slipping. Vanessa's attempts to keep everyone in line only fueled their insecurities and heightened attention. As the weeks passed, the atmosphere grew more volatile. Carter became more erratic, his obsession driving him to extreme behavior. He began following Vanessa outside of school, desperate for proof of her commitment to him. Anthony's anonymous messages to the administration started to gain traction, sparking quiet investigations that put Vanessa on edge. Maya's manipulations grew bolder, her ambition blinding her to the risks. Each of them believed they were in control, but the truth was far more dangerous. The fragile balance Vanessa had worked so hard to maintain was collapsing, and none of them realized how close they were to disaster. The relationships, once carefully managed by Vanessa, had spiraled into chaos. Carter's desperation, Anthony's cunning, and Maya's ambition were a volatile mix that threatened to explode at any moment. And Vanessa, blinded by her belief in her ability to control the situation, failed to see the storm that was brewing. The storm brewing in Vanessa's life finally reached its breaking point when an anonymous email was sent to the school administration, detailing allegations of her inappropriate relationships with students. Although the message contained no concrete evidence, the accusations were enough to prompt an internal investigation. Whispers of scandal began circulating among the faculty, and Vanessa, for the first time, felt the weight of her precarious position. She could feel the walls closing in as her once perfect facade began to crumble under the scrutiny. She was determined to protect herself, but the pressure was mounting, and she couldn't escape the growing suspicion that someone close to her was behind the accusations. Anthony was pleased with the chaos he had set in motion. The investigation, while still in its early stages, created a distraction that he could exploit. He continued to drop anonymous hints, carefully ensuring his tracks were covered. His goal wasn't just to expose Vanessa, but to ensure that Carter and Maya were implicated as well. Anthony's manipulations were calculated. He wanted to emerge from the wreckage unscathed while everyone else faced the fallout. He began planting subtle suggestions in conversations with his classmates, sowing seeds of doubt about Carter's behavior and Maya's intentions. Anthony's ability to control the narrative gave him a sense of power he had never experienced before, and he thrived on it. Carter, on the other hand, was unraveling. The pressure of keeping Vanessa's secrets and his obsession with her had taken a toll on his mental state. When news of the investigation reached him, his paranoia intensified. He was convinced that Anthony was behind it, and that Vanessa's promises to him were slipping away. Carter's desperation drove him to extremes. He began stalking Anthony, hoping to find evidence that would discredit him. Late at night, Carter would sit outside Anthony's house, watching for any sign that he was the source of the allegations. The jealousy and anger that consumed Carter made him reckless, and he started to spiral out of control. Maya, too, felt the pressure of the investigation. While she had been careful to keep her involvement with Vanessa discreet, she couldn't shake the feeling that her connection to Vanessa might come to light. Maya's competitive nature, which had once driven her to outmaneuver Carter and Anthony, now became her downfall. She began to act defensively, withdrawing from her usual routines and avoiding questions from her peers. Her behavior only fueled suspicion, and rumors about her closeness to Vanessa began to spread. Maya, normally composed and calculating, started to lose her grip on the situation, and her carefully constructed image began to crack. Vanessa, desperate to regain control, tried to manage the fallout by addressing the investigation head-on. She denied the allegations, presenting herself as a victim of baseless rumors. Behind the scenes, she worked to placate Carter, Anthony, and Maya, knowing that any of them could expose her if they chose to. She pleaded with Carter to remain loyal, reassured Anthony that she trusted him, and promised Maya that their connection was special. But her efforts to maintain control only added fuel to the fire. Each student interpreted her actions as proof of her favoritism, intensifying their rivalries. The tension among the students reached a boiling point when Carter confronted Anthony after school. Carter accused Anthony of being the source of the allegations, his voice trembling with anger. The confrontation quickly escalated, drawing the attention of other students. Anthony, ever the manipulator, turned the situation to his advantage, accusing Carter of being unstable and obsessive. The public nature of their argument brought unwanted attention, and both boys were called into the principal's office for questioning. While the administration had no solid evidence of wrongdoing, the incident added another layer of complexity to the investigation. As Vanessa watched the situation spiral out of control, she realized that her carefully constructed world was crumbling. The students she had manipulated were no longer under her control, and the lies she had told to maintain her position were beginning to unravel. The investigation intensified, and Vanessa's once sterling reputation was now under scrutiny. What had started as a series of secret relationships had become a dangerous game of manipulation and betrayal, and Vanessa was no longer the one pulling the strings. The breaking point came on a cold, gray morning that no one in the small town would ever forget. The investigation into Vanessa's conduct was now in full swing, and the mounting pressure had pushed everyone involved to their limits. The tension between Carter, Anthony, and Maya had reached a dangerous peak, and Vanessa, once confident in her ability to control the situation, was now drowning in a sea of secrets, lies, and paranoia. What happened next was as inevitable as it was shocking. Carter, driven by a mix of desperation and obsession, had decided that he couldn't let Vanessa slip away from him. The idea of losing her to Anthony, to Maya, or to the investigation was more than he could bear. His paranoia had turned into a dangerous resolve, and he began making plans to ensure that he would be the only one left in Vanessa's life. On the night before everything unraveled, Carter spent hours crafting a letter, detailing his feelings for Vanessa and his belief that they were meant to be together. But in the shadows of his mind, a darker plan was forming, one that would make sure no one could come between them again. Meanwhile, Anthony, ever the opportunist, had his own agenda. He had continued feeding the administration anonymous tips, confident that the scandal would eventually expose Vanessa and ruin her career. But Anthony had underestimated the depth of Carter's obsession. He failed to notice the signs that Carter had been watching him, tracking his movements, and growing increasingly fixated on the idea that Anthony was his greatest rival. Anthony's smug confidence blinded him to the danger lurking just beneath the surface, and he continued his manipulations without realizing how precarious his position had become. Maya, still reeling from the pressure of the investigation, had reached her breaking point as well. She had always prided herself on her ability to outmaneuver the competition, but now she felt cornered. The rumors about her relationship with Vanessa had spread like wildfire, and Maya could feel her reputation slipping away. Her fear of exposure had turned to anger not just at the situation but at Vanessa herself. Maya blamed Vanessa for everything: the rumors, the investigation, and the chaos that had taken over her life. She began gathering her own evidence, determined to expose Vanessa before anyone could implicate her further. Maya's determination to protect herself blinded her to the dangers surrounding her. On that fateful morning, Vanessa arrived at the school early, hoping to address the growing suspicions and salvage what was left of her career. She had no idea that Carter was already there, waiting for her in the parking lot. His letter, clutched in his hand, was a last-ditch effort to win her over. But when Vanessa brushed him off, distracted by the weight of the investigation, something inside Carter snapped. All the jealousy, obsession, and rage he had bottled up exploded in an instant. He lunged at Vanessa, his voice a mixture of pleading and fury, but she pulled away, shouting for him to stop. Anthony, arriving just in time to witness the confrontation, saw an opportunity to assert his control. He stepped between them, taunting Carter and escalating the situation. The two boys began to fight, their anger spilling out in a violent clash that drew the attention of others arriving at the school. Maya, who had just stepped out of her car, saw the chaos unfolding and froze, unsure of what to do. In the confusion, Carter grabbed a heavy object from the ground, a discarded piece of metal, and swung it at Anthony, striking him with deadly force. Anthony collapsed, blood pooling beneath him, as a horrified silence fell over the scene. Maya screamed, the sound piercing the cold morning air, and Carter dropped the weapon, his face a mask of shock and regret. Vanessa, frozen in place, could only watch as her world finally collapsed around her. The police arrived within minutes, taking Carter into custody as paramedics rushed to tend to Anthony, who was pronounced dead at the scene. The investigation into Vanessa's conduct took a dramatic turn as the events of that morning brought everything to light. The secrets she had worked so hard to hide were exposed, and the lives she had entangled in her web were left shattered. In the aftermath, Vanessa was arrested and charged with multiple counts of misconduct, her career and reputation destroyed. Carter faced charges of second-degree murder, his obsession with Vanessa leading to a tragic and violent end. Maya, traumatized by the events, withdrew from school, unable to face the fallout. The town, once quiet and idyllic, was left reeling from the scandal and the senseless loss of life. What had started as a series of forbidden relationships ended in tragedy, leaving scars that would never fully heal.